Allow me to greet over 100 participants that registered today, and especially our speakers today, Mr. Alexander Siryk from Metals Consulting International and Emanuele Norsa from Siderweb. I'm also pleased to have the presence of our president, Mr. Fernando Espada, that will help us with the agenda. For this webinar to run smoothly, I would suggest you all to use the chat for the questions. I'm informing also that the slides will be available at the end of the webinar, and it will be sent by email. And I will now give the floor to Mr. Fernando Espada.
Okay, so good morning to everyone. Thank you for your attendance to this webinar from EUROMETAL, and thank you especially to both Alexander Siryk and Emanuele Norsa, both close friends of EUROMETAL, for allowing their time to share their thoughts with us. We are with a very hot topic on the table right now, the safeguards and the evolution of the safeguards for the European Commission, especially after the last changes in the ruling that were communicated and that came finally into force last week, as published in the official journal of the European Union. And we are now trying to understand what is the impact that they will have in the very short term with the material that was declared for import on Monday, and for the months to come, because this is really changing the rules of the market. So after this very short introduction, we go for really the interest, which is listening to Alexander first, and then Emanuele. I will take the questions at the end of the presentations, and I will try to formulate it to both of our friends. Thank you very much, and welcome to the webinar.
Thank you, Fernando. Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you for the invitation, and I'll start sharing my screen. Today we are at the second webinar regarding EU steel import quotas. The first webinar was exactly 1 year ago, and it was more focused on the methodology of the data collection, about specific methodological items for this quota analysis, collection, reporting, and all the things. So I ask everybody interested in this discussion to check EUROMETAL's YouTube channel, where this video is shared together with other interesting videos. So you can double check, because fundamental framework does not change much from this point. Couple of words about MCI. MCI is a team of professionals who are focused on the steel market, steel supply chain, steel industry, supporting companies in terms of operational improvements and also their business development, largely specializing in the commercial topics like market research and analysis, M&A process support, business development, and feasibility studies. Today, we are talking about recently prolonged quota system. So first of all, we would refresh for you the context and why the system exists, and what is the development and general dynamic of the system. Then we would build a SEN for the current for the changes which were applied, analyzing the most recent periods of the quotas, and also showing why certain aspects appeared in the European Commission's agenda, European steel industry agenda. Then we will go through the changes which are proposed to address those vulnerabilities in the regulation, and briefly discuss implications. This is more discussion session, because those implications are as they are seen right now. So let's start. So this story with tariff-rated quotas started already long ago, more than 6 years ago, with the American investigation on steel and aluminum imports in 2017. In 2018, the first measures were implemented, and effectively European quota system was a reflection on these developments in the North America to protect European market from inflow or overflow of the material which is supposed to be redirected from North America. It is worth to mention that it is already a second prolongation period, because the original measures, they're supposed to last till 2022. And after 2022, they were prolonged for 2 consequent years. Now we are in 2024. And the measures would last till 30th June 2026. There is a short notice in the regulation that European Commission may review functioning and the framework in course of this term, and all players, they saw that effectively that is what is happening, because in the terms of duration of the previous measures, we saw multiple changes, adjustments, and extra regulations. So this landscape is continuously changing to address challenges which European steel production industry is facing. This is one side. Other side is that we are currently as a platform of the European distributors, and with this, so we are in the glasses of European distributors and people who are securing supply chain, including import supply chain. Therefore, we also need to think, what does it mean for the distribution business, which is not fully related to, or not always fully related to, the local and domestic production. So what was happening in the last reporting period, and what forced European Commission to make the adjustments, because they're quite substantial for the recent period. So this is a general overview. All EUROMETAL members, they received weekly updates based on the report, and this is based on the most recent last period update of the last week, which is closing the reporting periods. There might be some extra deliveries allocated in this quarter, but from our experience, those are not big quantities, so they are slightly changing in course of the following weeks after the end of the period. But generally, this is the current situation, so we don't expect like dramatic changes in this picture. And the first observation that you see that the most quotas, they are utilized up or around to 50%. So we have maximum utilization of half of the quota, maybe a little bit more. In addition, there is a little bit changed layout to our standard format for EUROMETAL, because now it is not the total summary, and you can see that for the biggest categories and basically for all categories, imports effectively are increasing. So there is more space due to various factors, which we are going to discuss later on, which are impacting the dynamics. But the most important observation is that there is a lot larger import, and you see that effectively quotas are not fully utilized, which we would see why and why is it happening. Based on the example of several tables, which are a little bit complicated and full of figures, but it's amazing data, just covering all products in 2 projections. So what we combined in this table is slightly different with what was reported on Monday. I'm not sure if Ricardo forwarded already this report, but on Monday we reported the closing period, and this is 4th quarterly periods of the latest annual period of the regulation. And we compared this with the result with the end of the first reporting period, which ended, which started on July 1st, 2023, and lasts till the end of September 2023. And basically, this is for flat products. It's worth to mention that in the reporting, that is what we discussed in the methodology with EUROMETAL, on purpose, we are not following the production or industrial logic of the product grouping, rather focusing on the market or commercial logic. So we have some products which can be assigned to flat as a product group, as a part of flat production value chain, but which operate in a different type of business model. So that, mostly direct supplies or a project business or something like this. So we group this in other categories. So those flats are basically carbon flats products, commodity carbon flats products which are grouped in this category. And what we see is that there are markets. There are countries, there are, first of all, like country-specific quotas, and you see typically 5 countries who were assigned country-specific quotas back in 2018, 2019, when this investigation was running. And many of those sources, they became not really economical compared to other sources. So this is one of the reasons why we see that many quotas, they are not used. There is also the UK, which was part of the European Union in the time of adaptation of or limitation of the legislation. This picture for this and all following tables like this, it represents market status for 6 years ago. So the world has changed since that time. Therefore, we see that some sources, they are not really actual for the market. They are not really reflecting import parity to the European Union, or even not always import parity. We know that there are several developing markets which are turning from net imports to net exports due to the cyclical development of the large scale. And the first pickup item over here is regarding the force adjustment in the quotas. It is regarding this cap of 15%. So here you see basically almost the only reason for this. This is the largest quota in the total amount. So we are talking about roughly 1 million tons, which you see constantly used during first week or even first hours of the new period announcement. So this volume is indicating the purpose to address this 15% cap, and we are going to talk later on about the details. It is also important to mention that, and you see this, that the situation is different per product. It is also different per specific country quotas, and positions of several players having those country-specific quotas also vary across different product categories. The next table is longs. So you see that most of the factors which worked for flat products, they do not apply. So longs quota is used to the smaller extent. Why? Because flats in the last almost decade, maybe a little bit shorter period of time, in the last like 5, 6, 7 years, became more marginal product, and with more feasible logistics and transportation costs. Therefore, they can travel more. And longs, they don't have this advantage for importers. Therefore, there are quotas which are typically not fully used. So we have just several examples of suppliers which remain feasible, or there is a demand for this imported material in the European Union. Tubes and pipes, different story. So this is a story about basically Turkey and China for the supplies. Those are the players who are using. And there are other players who utilize their quota from time to time, and others which remain at almost non-utilization part. And please also put attention to the others part. In this case, you see that, for example, there is Turkey as a supplier of hollow sections, and the quota is fully used. And there are residual volumes from the total quota, which are not used. And there is also adjustment in the regulation, which was not like so widely discussed or announced, about this access and this rules. So let's talk later. Stainless world is the completely different story. We see basically this is a story about India. So India is using the most of the quotas for the products, and at the same time all other suppliers, with maybe some exemptions, they are not using this volume. And again, we can check also in this case others, so India and others, which I would expect also India are utilizing their quota for this category, and others are not. There are many factors which are impacting the current situation, and I try to highlight the major points which induced changes in the system. So let's discuss and focus on what happens. There are 4 major items. The first one is that I think that I will just go through quite quickly about the general description, because I know that everyone has read them in the announcements. And then let's discuss in more details what is inside of certain changes. So reduction of liberalization rate. So this means that coming back to the development of the quota, that it was larger, it is higher, so higher volume is allowed than it was allowed 6 years ago. So it is reduced. There is a remapping of developing countries. So the listing is changing, and not for the first time. There is also reconfiguration of tariff-rated quota access regime. And this is about access of country-specific players to the residual or others quota. And fourth implementation, this is regulation regarding this others quota, where now, and this is one of the biggest changes in all the system, where now every specific country should not have more than 15% of the quota use. So this is one of the most essential developments over there. And effectively, you saw that there are only several categories who really impacted which are really impacted by this regulation. Let's go into the details. So liberalization rates. This is an analytical picture, because you know that at the very beginning, those were not equal periods, that the quota started in the middle of or at the beginning of 2019 with separate regulation from February to July. So it's a little bit difficult to combine the exact situation, but it is also not important for our observations, because it's just a rough picture to show that by more than 20%, European justification of the quota extension, they are talking about 25%. We see that it is at least more than 20% of larger volumes of material combined for all products may enter by now to the market. And this is almost 4 million tons of extra import opportunity in this market. At the same time, and there we are referring to the figures which are published by Eurofer as annual report as European steel figures. So using the workout of our colleagues, we see that at the same time, European market was developing much slower. And we also see this decrease from 2022 to 2023. So the market was in absolutely different dynamics and the quota development. Plus the fact that here we are combining long and flat products together. And you saw this from the quota allocation, that for long, the situation with the markets, with the import share is a different one. And there is a much larger penetration of flat segment by import. It is close to 25% in some of the previous years. So there is quite enough space, and the space is also extending. The space is also extending, and now it is going to extend with reduced rates. Also based on the larger base figure from the previous period. And it also was to mention that when the system was implemented, it was based on the market averages from 2016 or 17. So there were like several years period with assessing the measures. And at the beginning of the implementation, those volumes, because the purpose was not to restrict the market but to protect the market and its structure from this inflow of redirected material from the US. Therefore, at the very beginning, there was already like 5% of liberalization on top. And everyone remembers that, for example, 2018 was not bad year at all. So it was one of the best years. In 2019, we saw only fourth quarter, which was much slower than the previous market. So this was quite a healthy steel market for all of us. And the second implication is change in the developing countries. Bright picture. So we highlighted with this light red color. So this is a traffic lights basically system behind. So we have red and green. And this table is appendix to the general regulation. And there are changes. And the most dramatic change, it happened, if I remember this correctly, in the middle of the last year, when we saw the material from Vietnam entering the market. And what we see from the current table is that Vietnam is in this table. So there was a patch on this market vulnerability, because Vietnam is a developing country according to European or United Nations classification, and it is also recognized by European Union as a developing country. There is a free trade agreement with Vietnam, and to support developing countries, European Union is providing certain benefits for them in terms of the trade. And we see that other suppliers, they are not blocked, they are not exempt from this regulation, for example, for category 1, which is hot rolled coils, hot rolled strips and sheets. And I think that one of the implications, which will be summarized at the end of the discussion, we would see some other material entering according to the same scheme. As an example, I don't see in the list Algeria, and the recent startup of hot rolled coils mills by one of the players would definitely enter this flow. And there are multiple other adjustments. So what is important to notice over there for the supply chain, this is also important that this patchwork for developing markets is changing, and some suppliers which were not viable in the previous periods, they might become viable in the most recent periods and reactivate it for your supply chain as an importing distributor. Third part, that is where I was putting your attention to the others quota versus highly utilized country-specific quotas. This is market access regime. And this is about access of residual or others quotas by country specific. So for example, if Indian quota is exhausted for certain material, let's say stainless steel, in the last annual period, this residual volume can be accessed by country specific supplier. In the official document, it is mentioned that the system now is changing from 3 regimes to 2 regimes, but effectively, like from the analysis of the document, from the more detailed dive, we still see four regimes over there. So we see access regime. This means that in those categories, country-specific suppliers, at the end of annual period, they can access this residual quota volumes and can supply more material. Implication for steel distribution that in the fourth quarter, if the volume for the best import parity or for your supplier was not available, it might be viable at the end of the period. And no access. This means that country-specific suppliers, they are not allowed to enter this residual quota. There is a special regime for hot rolled coils and for metal coated or deeply galvanized, mostly parts. And there are also categories where there are no country-specific quotas. Therefore, it's called like a global administration. Therefore, there is nobody who can access this residual volume just because it is also managed in this way. And also, actually, there is another cap in this situation, which means that following the example of India for stainless steel, the supplier cannot access the full volume of this residual quota, but only there is a cap of 30% of this part. So cap somehow existed also in the previous scheme. So only 30% of country-specific supplier. Country-specific supplier can address only 30% of this residual quota. Fourth point is this implementation of 15% cap for residual tariff-rated quota allocation. And you see that it is mostly regarding hot rolled coils, where we see this others, which are effectively oversupplied in this part. So it's at the very beginning, so there's almost more than 1 million tons were allocated in the first week, so which were not used, so only 1 million was allocated to this part. And this is, I will check, this is a timing. I think we are still fine to go. So, and so there is summary for the last month. So we took this hot rolled coils category and checked statistical data for the last 4 months. This is the latest available statistic. And we took over there the residual quota participants, so the others category in this classification. And the largest one are Japan, Taiwan, so there is not only Vietnamese material in this part. Korea, Egypt, and there are other players. And compare their volumes, which they supplied to the European import market, and also price, basically to address another implication which was discussed, that after announcements of this 15% cap, as one of the reasons, that was mentioned as one of the reasons that domestic prices slightly improved after this announcement, which makes sense because you see that average price, and here we are talking about price as an analytical category. It's not a specific product, specific point of time price. It's average price for imported material, which we can check from the statistical data. And in average, Vietnamese material has the highest discount compared to all other players. On the other hand, you see this from these shares, which were calculated based on the last period, that it is slightly smoothing the difference between several players. And as a second implication of the adjustments with 15% cap is that we should see probably other stronger player in this growth. But from Vietnam, you see in the last quarter, it was slightly above 50%. So which means that a smaller amount of cheaper material would be available, but not dramatically different. Another problem which we see actually for the whole industry, which is coming from this part of the report, is that there is a high, this part of residual quotas is a source of high volatility in the market. We compare this with the country-specific quotas utilization, and you see that there is a very regular supply chain behind. So there are quite relatively similar volumes which are entering import markets every month. So this is a constant part where people can plan how to structure this. And in the residual part of the quota, the situation is completely different. You see that large amount of material is piling up in the ports, in the stocks, and entering the market at one phase, and just creating a lot of fluctuations at certain moments in the market. And this situation, we see that it is not really changing. And as a benchmark, also some intra-EU suppliers of different types. So it's not ranking of intra-EU suppliers. It's just to take some Western European, Southern European, Central European suppliers. It's just to build this picture, and we see that it is operated differently than on this part. So I'm finalizing with the implications and talking about their major outcomes. We should say that the new regulation is significantly changing some aspects, especially the most vulnerable aspects of the past regulation. At the same time, it retains the framework, the operational framework, which also, as a consequence, has this underutilized quotas because of lack of economical sense. And we see that what does it mean for the steel distributors? It's essential to always review the supply chain, because suppliers which were not allowed to enter the market anymore, which were non-economical from the regulations perspective, may get this access in the latter periods. Secondly, the changes with developing countries, they can be like induced in EU regulation. We checked the table and how it is evolving from the last periods. So there are liberalization steps and the protectionist steps, and it is always changing. And talking about MENA, talking about ASEAN countries, there is a huge development in the path of the capacities in various countries. Some of them, they enjoy this status of developing market, and may enter the European Union steel markets as a parity, and therefore just carefully review and reconsider opportunities and threats which might come to your business as the companies who are securing supply chain for the European end users and end customers, because we also need to appreciate not only this regulatory framework, but that the market is driven by mechanical engineers, by automotive users, which also must retain competitive in their market and support the development of the demand and the business in Europe. So basically, those are all major findings. I was not able to check questions in the chat, so maybe we should do it right now, and I'm open to answer your questions.
There was a question. Alexander, thank you very much for your presentation. There was a question saying, in your opinion, which are the countries who are going to benefit the most from the 15% cap as a single country within the other countries?
Actually, that is one of the notices which I missed in my speech, because that is what I was also marking in my mind, just going through the presentation which was prepared by our team. is that the allocation of this material geographically in Europe, it is also very, very variable. And when we talk about these macro developments, it is important for the general trends, for the general picture and so on, but we should not forget that behind of every development, there are specific buyers of the materials, there are specific business models, there is a processing supply chain, value chain, and this material also tends to land in the European Union in the different parts of the Union. So there is this Benelux hub with Antwerp and Rotterdam, where the bulk majority of Japanese material is going like there. So this is a supply chain over there. And suppliers of the Vietnamese materials, they are much more diversified. And I know that in Southern Europe, there are tube makers who are dependent in their competition with the suppliers from outside of European Union, for example, with the Turkish mills. They rely on this cheaper material to compete. So this is their competitiveness. And therefore, with a specific benefits for the countries, the most of this material is entering Benelux hub. So they are entering this Western Europe. A lot is entering Italy, and smaller quantity is entering Spain as a market. Therefore, I would just expect, and the cheapest from the material by the benchmark, by the average prices, is entering Southern European countries. Therefore, two consequences in terms of the benefits. One is a volume consequence. And with this change, I would expect more implications for the Southern Europe, because it's slightly different material. And so just checking the share of Japan, which might be lowered. So we can expect what this material would somebody also miss in the Netherlands, in Belgium as a processors. On the other hand, like price-wise, the cheapest material is entering Southern European market, and this price implication supposed to be there. But we can only guess, because this is a living system with the decision-making behind this. So finally, everybody is calculating what is their potential profits delivering certain material to certain location. So we can also expect some changes, or I would say migration of certain structures, depending on the market demand and the need. Hopefully I answered the question.
Yeah, hopefully. Yep. Thank you very much, Alexander. And I have one question which is more related to the consequences of this kind of difficulties to import. Have you detected that the imports are migrating to more added value parts? In the case of category 1 to stamped parts for automotive destination?
That is, I'm not prepared to answer this just immediately, just because we can check this based on there are different codes for 4A, 4B, which are a little bit like differently managed. And as far as I remember, one was dedicated to steel service centers, if it was not just changed vice versa, because one is for the originally one was for the countries which are protected by anti-dumping measures and others not, and then it was changed to the one who can be booked by steel service centers and others not. This is what would require certain like other investigation. We can assume something by the origin of the material, because linking the origin of the material in Japan and supply somewhere in Hungary, we can expect some supply chain of the Japanese automotive suppliers. So this would require some further investigation, but I think that we can find some clear answer on this about stamping, automotive developments, or tube and pipe makers, because it is seen when we see the data is talking to us. You see who is behind the certain flow, but it was not summarized in this way.
Okay, thank you very much, Alexander. I do not see more questions. In that case, thank you very much, and we pass the the term to Emanuele, a well-known colleague of all of us, now working with Siderweb, and the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Emanuele. And thank you, Alexander.
Thank you, Fernando. Thank you, everyone. I will share I did a very small presentation this time, to be honest. I wanted to mainly be open to questions if you have some. But yes, I'm happy just to give you a small outlook of what is happening. We all know that the review of the safeguard measure is going to have an impact. How much of this impact will be visible, it's still unknown. And mainly, as you will see from my presentation, it's because we are going through a period of very depressed demand anyway in Europe, and this is not actually supporting any big impact of the news of the prolongation of the safeguard measure and the changes. So I will not go into specifics of the changing, but I want to see what are the implications. Let's start with this slide that it's very simple. We took from Eurostat the 2023 data of imports of HRC and wire rod from the different countries. In orange, you see the countries that already have a country-specific quota, so they already are included in a country-specific system. They have a limit to how much they can import every quarter. In yellow, on the other hand, you see countries that are included in the other countries allocation, but that based on the 2023 numbers, they are already exceeding the 15%. Why we did this is because I want to answer one of the questions that, of course, was submitted before. From this we can understand easily, based on the data that we have, which country can benefit from increasing their exports included in the other countries, and which will have to lower their exports due to the changes especially for HRC. There is a mistake there. I noticed that Japan for HRC should be in yellow, of course. You see it in white, but you see it's over 1 million, so it should be in yellow. So what I want to show is that if you look at HRC, you see growing countries importing into Europe. Saudi Arabia, for example, over 100,000 tons in 2023. Brazil, Australia, they're still below the 15% allocation of the other countries. They have therefore room to improve their sales, and they also are in a better position because they know that other countries such as Egypt, Japan, Taiwan, even Vietnam will have to lower their imports because they will have to stay within the limit of the 15%. So by doing this, of course, there is a room for some countries to take advantage when it comes to supplying, and some will have to lower it. Algeria was mentioned before me, of course. As you can see, in 2023, no HRC were imported from Algeria. Algeria imported some long products, wire rod, for example. No HRC was imported, but of course, if we look at the map and we look at the investment that are going on in Algeria and in North Africa in particular, you see also Morocco there with only 1,000 tons of imports in 2023. If we look at that, we see that there are also opportunities not only for suppliers that are already good suppliers that can increase their supply, but also new suppliers, and Algeria is definitely one. Probably not by the end of this year or not in this quarter, but orders might be arriving by the end of this year, which means they might be seen in the data from the beginning of next year. What are the implications? Again, we saw that one of the implications is some countries will have room to export more into Europe. Other countries will need to diminish a little bit or to limit their exports to Europe. But what is the impact straight away today? Today we enter the new quarter, the new rule already applies. So buyers of HRC, for example, will have to clear at customs the material they have at the docks, which was ordered 4 to 5 to 6 months ago. If they wish to do so, some of the buyers will be forced to pay around 10%, we calculated, of duty for some of the region of the countries that are within the other countries, and therefore the 15% cap. Overall, the cost could be around 50 to 70 euros per ton for the HRC under other countries to be cleared at customs. Now the question is, as you know, importers can decide if they want to clear their material or not. So now the question is, how much of this material will be cleared? If the importers will decide to take the cost on them, maybe the 50 euros per ton cost to clear the material because they need the material, or if they will leave the material at the docks. If they choose to leave the material at the docks, we calculated with, of course, traders. We spoke with traders that calculated it could take up to 9 months to clear some of this HRC sitting at European docks. And this, of course, will create a backlog and problem, not at docks per se, but it will create an issue because, of course, as new orders will come in, there will still be material sitting at docks that needs to be cleared every first day of the new quarter. So this shows, as it was shown before me, of course, that especially for the other countries, as an observer, I can understand that the European Commission is has been trying to put changes to the safeguard measures to try and sort of limit the possibilities of one country to use all of the other quotas, or to limit the fact that the supply is a little bit not constant. But the reality is that we keep seeing that the supply, especially from the other countries category, is all done in the first 2 days of the quarter. So this new rule will not change that. It would actually create a new problem, which is forcing buyers that order many months ago to not clear their material today at the docks, wait to clear that in the next 3 months, 6 months, or even 9 months, and therefore creating a backlog, also clashing with new orders that will be made by importers. So the issue is there, and in my opinion, is not really an issue of cost. Is not the 50 to 70 euros, which, by the way, in the current scenario, in the current low demand and low margin scenario, is a big cost. But the issue is that strategies of clearance of HRC, for example, at docks, will create even further problems. So the new regulation is not reducing issues at the docks, but is creating new issues at the docks and uncertainty, of course, in a moment when uncertainty is clearly not needed in a market that is under pressure. Apart from that, I wanted to look at prices. Everyone keeps saying the new regulation, in particular for HRC, will bring a little bit less competition potentially in the import market, and specifically, as it was shown before me very well, some of the low-cost importers anyway will have their cap at 15% of the volume. So there will be a potential for prices domestically to rise due to the lower competition from imports. The reality is we are in a moment, I've put here prices, this is from Kalanish because it's international, wire rod Northern Europe, HRC Northern Europe, you see red and green. From the beginning of 2022 until today, we are in a declining market in terms of prices. We know what happened. The main reason for that is that we are going through a phase of low demand. We went through a phase of destocking. Now it's a phase of real low demand in the market. So we arrive in this situation where the safeguards are changed in a moment where prices are relatively low compared to the average of the last 2 years. And we don't see, to be honest, as of today, as much as people can, as much as sources in the market can speculate, we don't see an upward trend created by the momentum of the changes in the safeguard. You see here, HRC in Northern Europe have been stable for the last 3 months, and they are not looking up at the moment. Wire rod have been stable for almost a year with some uplift. I mean, stable looking up, but at the moment it's not looking up. I've looked into Italy as well. As you know, Italy is one of the biggest importers, so the impact of imports should be very quick on the domestic market. I've put here HRC Italy import in this yellow-green line. You see there is a little bit upward momentum on cost of import, but the domestic market is still not registering any real uplift. There is a little bit of volatility, very slow, but there is no real uplift. So the question is, and the same if you go into details and you look at the last 3 months, you see very clearly that prices have been relatively stable, and today they are either even below the for domestic prices the beginning of the last quarter of April. So there is no sign for a real recovery in prices. So now the big question is what is going to happen. Here the same with the wire rod, Italy domestic stability, no sign of real recovery. So I open the floor to questions, of course, but what I wanted to highlight is that there is an opportunity for some countries to increase their exports into Europe. Yes, there is an opportunity. There is an opportunity for importers to create new sort of import flows with new countries. Yes, but this opportunity at the moment is not traducing in higher prices for domestic suppliers. So this opportunity is not supporting the domestic market because demand is just too low at the moment and the sentiment is just too negative. So we were expecting a few weeks back that this would have input a little bit of momentum in the market, but so far it is not. So I just want to, I'll open the microphone to the questions, of course. You took off my screen, but this is the main topic that I wanted to talk about.
Thank you very much again, Emanuele, for your presentation. I have a question. So summarizing from what you are saying, and if the countries stick to the 15% cap, we might remove something like 1.2 million tons from the market. And if I understand you right, is that there is potentially we will face the reality that even if you remove 1.2 million tons from the market, that the prices do not react.
So yes, I mean, the reality is this. There is a potential to remove 1 million or even more of supply in the market. We have to remember that this supply might be very quickly, part of this at least might be very quickly taken over by other countries. So it's difficult to say that the removal will be of 1 million or 1.2 million because other countries will take advantage. It's true that this is not the case for this first quarter because the material that buyers are clearing today was ordered 4 months ago, where we did not know of these rules. So clearly, especially in this quarter and the next one, there will be less volumes arriving from the other countries' quotas. Let's put it
exactly. So
let's say it's around 500,000. Let's say it's around half of it because we're talking about 6 months probably. The time for the market supply to readjust and potentially import more from, as we said, Saudi Arabia, Brazil, or Algeria eventually. So in this 6 months, we might lose around 500,000.
Okay, but if we lose 500,000 tons, you also have 1 million tons of those, which has 60 or 70 euros more than it was expected.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And then at the same time, one of the reasons that the people have been relying on material from Vietnam, Taiwan, Japan, is that the quality of the material was meeting relatively close to the European supply.
Yes.
I wonder if we can say the same thing for countries like Algeria.
Well, that's a good question. Exactly. I think Alexander was very good in also answering the topic of port of entrance, because of course there are countries that can meet some of the needs for commodity grades or for some grades, but they will never be able to meet, or at least not in the short term, not in the medium term, be able to meet the quality of some other countries. You mentioned Japan, which is clearly one of the most important ones. So yeah, there is an issue. There is an issue of supply. Now the question is, first of all, I'm not saying that there won't be any upward trend in prices. I'm saying that usually in a market like the one we are in Europe for HRC, the response should be very quick. And we are noticing that there is no response. That we have known about this change almost 3 weeks ago, almost a month ago, let's say. Nothing has actually pushed domestic prices up since we knew this news in a clear way. And why? Because the sentiment is very low. So there might be definitely it's very likely that it will help prices to move up a little bit. But my question to the market is why it don't happen yet? And the answer is, unfortunately, in my opinion, because the sentiment in the demand side is just too low at the moment. And this is, yeah.
Don't you put that one of the reasons might be the uncertainty on what the impact, the real impact of the 15% cap is going to be?
Exactly.
Because
that's the other thing that I was trying to say, is that the other problem is that, and this is something that the European Commission, I think Alexander's slide is one of the first slides from Alexander was very interesting, because it showed that during the last 6 years, 5 years and a half of the safeguard, one of the problem is that the amount of changes that have been done to the system is very high, especially if we compare it to what happened in the US with the Section 232 that blocked almost, that put a rule for everyone. There were, of course, agreements, as we know. America then started to have country-to-country agreements to limit the effect. But the rule remained the same for everyone. Now, what did the European Union did? Because of the way it's organized, it kept implementing changes. And I agree with you. One of the reasons why the price has not risen in the domestic market might be that the only implication that came from this change is further uncertainty. We all know uncertainty is not good for the market. It's not good for the market because it stops any kind of buying activity. Because what do I mean, as EUROMETAL, what do I do as a distributor, as a processor, I stop my buying activity, my restocking, when I'm completely uncertain of the future, and I actually buy more when I have a visibility of what's going to happen. So definitely, yes, one of the answers could be that at the moment we are in a new wave of uncertainty, which has stopped the market already, starting from a low point, because the market was already struggling in a way. That this can mean two things. On one hand, we might have a spark in activity in August and September as soon as we realize there is a lack of material from the docks that we were expecting. And this, in my opinion, as an observer, is not good anyway, because it could bring an uplift in prices of 80 euros, 100 euros in 2 weeks, which we all know. Volatility is good. It's good for us, for analysts, because we have a lot to write about, but not for the market. Or the even more negative outcome would be that this current uncertainty slows down the market even further, and we realize by September that market flows can reorganize, but the European market continues to be in a weak sentiment, in a negative sentiment, also because we keep having no long-term view of our planning. So absolutely, I agree with you. I'm not saying the price is not rising. I'm saying that by today, by the 3rd of July, I would have expected to see prices starting to show some signs of recovery. And as of today, everyone can agree that those signs are just not there. Of course, we have to look at international market. The market is just not performing, is not pushing strongly. But on a European level, we should have seen an element of upward trend. And today, we don't see it. Then again, what's going to happen, I don't know. But I agree with you. Uncertainty is always bad. And the problem is that these changes keep bringing uncertainty. As Soffermet in Italy, suggested, the last resort request to the European Commission was, okay, the new system comes into effect, but at least make sure that what was ordered before is, can be used using the old system, which is a request that it's relatively, fair. Yes. I mean, because if you think about it, impose the new system, but let me use the old system at least until I finish the material that I ordered 4 months ago. But as of today, this has not been accepted. So anyway, the system is changing as we still need to clear the material that we ordered 5 months ago at a different price. And then we go back to the prices. 50, 70 euros per ton, maybe 6 months ago, was a hit that you would take in a market. Today, I didn't put it, but we do see there were the slides on costs and prices, so on profitability. With the profitability today, 50 to 70 euros is the difference between being a little bit profitable or actually losing money on your material coming in.
Yes. And one question for both of you that I can read it here. Sorry. As a summary, we can say that demand is so weak that even if you remove representative volumes, today we have not seen the prices reacting.
So for today, 3rd of July, I would say so. I would say that demand is so weak that even if you take away those volumes, we are not seeing the market reacting, especially because there is also, European mills are anyway keeping their output at not low levels, but relatively not very high levels. So there is room for Europeans to take a little bit of advantage of that supply that is missing. So as of today, I don't see these volumes missing in the market, impacting the market strongly, because demand is just not there to justify it.
Okay. And another question that I have here, and it's for both of you, and I think I know the answer. Do we expect more changes in the safeguard regulation in the months to come?
I will start with the answer. Actually, regarding your first question, I would like to share a screen because just recently, some days ago, this is what we are doing regularly. We are analyzing data from the European Commission, and this is a wrap-up. This is a wrap-up about sentiments in the basic metals, which is effectively largely the steel industry, and several other segments, leading segments like for automotive, industry, human pipe, and construction. And this is a bit of sentiment, so those are not absolute volumes or values. Those are relative values of people who believe in certain situations or improvement or expect something from the market. And just take a look at this period. So we were not attaching 2009 data, but I think that in 2009, this pessimistic mode, which started at the end of the third quarter of the last year, was shorter. Because I do remember that, for example, in 2009, after start of crisis in September 2008, February was bottom of these expectations, and already in May, by memory, it improved and it was quite optimistic. Right now, we see this confidence, which is a composite indicator for the development, which considers production expectations, stocks assessment, order book assessment, and so on. You see, it is really negative. In the steel industry, it is really like negative. It is, I would say, even significantly negative already for almost 1 year. And Emanuele correctly mentioned about this restocking, destocking, because we were talking in 2021, as far as I remember, about certain mismatch in the cycle. So there was a real demand behind, people were consuming, and it was developing differently from the stockist business for people who were buying steel and they bought it was in 2022. They bought too much in Q1, Q2, and then it was a clear destocking of the market in Q3. So it's not a fluctuation. It is once again, I would like to highlight this topic that we really, on the level of regulators and so on, we should take care also about consuming segments in the European Union, because this is the end and like the final, I would say, goal and destination of this material, just regulating all those like inflow, outflows. We should also think about the absolute volume of the demand from which we are trying to cut certain volumes for the steel industry for some suppliers, because the mood in the consuming segments is quite negative. About future regulation, from what we see, there will be clearly further patches in this work. We should also not forget about parallel flow of anti-dumping, special investigations, and so on. I would also count on this part, because this is a parallel system which exists and which also protects the market separately. And for me, when I was thinking about this in the last months, it looks like more precise tool for some predatory actions in the market, because the system should contain this frame. We would expect already some adjustments with the entrance of Algeria on the developing countries regulation, because it's a big mill. It's a 2 million ton mill for the moment without downstream. So it will once again penetrate this residual quota for the first category, hot rolled coils. But also amid all those like changes which Emanuele mentioned in his report, the structure is basically quite stable. So some patchwork will continue. It is what is expected. But I would expect the frame is remaining, because we see from this frame that the general allocation of country-specific quotas is it is relevant to the market situation, with some exclusions like the Russian story and so on. It is relevant to the market of the 6 years ago. It never existed already for many, many years. Therefore, yes, there will be some patches to this.
Emanuele, some comments on the question about potential changes in the safeguards?
So it's difficult to say. We know the European Parliament is changing a little bit. From my point of view, from what we've seen during the last 5.5, 6 years, what is it? We should expect new changes. I mean, it's based on what we saw, meaning that changes have been done every review, more or less. They already wrote in the system that during the next 2 years anyway, they will look at the situation and could implement changes. I expect some changes. I expect the changes could be on specific countries, not big changes like the one we saw this time, but maybe on specific countries being flagged as a need to have a cap or something like this. Algeria could be one or other. So I expect this. Yes, absolutely. I wouldn't say that it won't happen. So definitely, I don't think changes. We should think that this is the last time it changes. Definitely, this doesn't help stability, especially in a declining market. We all know that. Yeah. So.
Okay, and one last question, and I wonder if it's for this webinar or we have to take another one. How do we assess the effect of the CBAM for the future? And because there was a question talking about the monetary policy of the EU.
Yeah, I saw that question. I will go very quickly. So first of all, monetary policy, we all were thinking that the interest rate would have lowered much quicker than it is. So I think there will be an effect. To be honest, I mean, the European Central Bank is doing its job in a way to keep inflation under control, but we should not expect by the end of the year a big changes in monetary policies. So I do not foresee this helping that much demand, especially because it's just not changing as fast as we would have expected maybe in January. If we had this conversation in January, we would have expected cut rates a lot deeper, and it's just not happening. It's going to be very slow. So that's one thing. Second thing, I just wanted to know, to tell Fernando on one thing, because you mentioned that 500,000, maybe 1 million tons of material missing. But we did, I mean, which is for us, I mean, as we look at it, it's a big amount. But let's not forget that there are, even within Europe, there are blast furnaces that could be relaunched, that are idled, temporarily idled. There is that supply exists into Europe. There is the supply into Europe. I was in Naples on Thursday, and we were with Mr. Quaranta, who's the head now of Acciaierie d'Italia, the former Ilva, and they're doing all the process of relaunching. And anyway, they have a plan to relaunch one of the blast furnaces before the end of the year, so by October. And of course, if we think about if we think in a general term, then 500,000 tons is relatively simple to supplement from domestic, or as Alexander mentioned and very clearly showed in his graph. Let's not forget that what we went from having country-specific quotas on HRC being fulfilled. Now we only finish the quotas of other countries, but we have all the country-specific quotas that we just don't use because they're not competitive in terms of prices. And so, of course, if the market changes, we might end up, and this could impact the prices, paying a little bit more to have material from countries that were not competitive 3, 6, 7 months ago, but now become competitive as Vietnam is not available in such a large amount anymore, or Japan, and so forth. So this is so yeah. And to finally, the effect of CBAM. The only thing I can say is CBAM, of course, has an effect. The biggest effect, in my opinion, of CBAM is one, European exports, because until they find a solution for export, this is already, it's creating anyway a problem on trade, because it makes European, not only it creates a problem when we import, but those barriers we already have with safeguard and things like that. We already are used to have a lot of barriers on imports, but in terms of exports is a further sort of hit on the European market. So definitely. And the other thing that I think it's interesting to put out there, maybe Alexander knows better than me, is we all said, okay, then CBAM is coming into effect, it's going to replace safeguard. But as of today, we will anyway have a period of time where we have both safeguard and CBAM. So my question, and this I don't have an answer, is how much the two together, when they're both effective, will impact the market. I mean, and that's a big question, because the reality is the European Commission doesn't treat CBAM, because it's not, as a trade measure. So the two measures can go together, which is, of course, a big issue because it adds even more complication to the importer. But maybe Alexander knows better how they can actually coexist in a way.
Yeah, basically that's the system. When we look in future, it worth to talk about several scenarios, and this is exactly the scenario case, because effectively we don't know what is going to happen, but we may assume what can happen and how certain elements may interact, leading to one or another outcome. Emanuele correctly mentioned that the nature of CBAM and TRQs, it's absolutely different, because talking about CBAM, it's environmental regulation and specific incentive or regulatory scheme for environmental performance of the mill with certain compensation mechanisms. And the design of TRQ system is dedicated to stop of the imported material overflow from other markets, and specifically from the Northern American markets to Europe. When they start to interact in the next periods, and CBAM is already like implementing, it's not a generic perspective anymore. There are comments also from officials and so on and that is what we also, I think, discussed in one of the traders days, maybe not even the last year, but the year before, that it is worth to keep for the European industry this tariff-rated quota system, at least to cover the CBAM period. Now we have this more than 1 year of like over coverage, so when the both systems will act together. And again, thinking about end users, I think that it would, with a certain artificial effects, limiting them in the supply resources, because there will be certain players and just thinking loud in this question, because we were not researching this interception. So we were always taking this like parts separately, trade and regulation and CBAM or anti-dumping and environmental regulations. There will be certain benefits for the players, and it is worth to mention that Turkish metallurgy, it is largely EAF based, and in the last years, even several years, there was a huge investment in certain product categories like hot rolled coils, other downstream products. Therefore, the market might be rebalanced towards new structures. So improving positions of one players and putting some disadvantage for others. And as effects, we could expect the overall price increase, because definitely the ones, but let's see on the demand, because all of us from the first course of universities, I remember that it's a subject of demand, supply, and equilibrium prices. That's a kind of fundamental. Therefore, if there is no demand, the market may behave in some other mode or way. And I also showed this from the slides that demand is not okay in this equation. We need to do something with the demands. And from the most recent announcements coming from European Central Bank, European Commission, that is how Emanuele mentioned, it's quite a slow process of easiness. As far as I remember, the interest rates, they expected to go down, and there are some predictions and forecasts, but would they be implemented or not? This is a question of decision, which we cannot predict. It's a decision, it's a policymaker's decision, decision-making decision. Another point which was interesting about CBAM and potential impact is that there is a price of ETS, which is stock-traded product. And it will also depend on the performance of this part of the equation. And I would also put the attention of our auditorium to the fact that it was significantly reconsidered in the most recent outlook. I think it was spring outlook, because before this long-term forecast for ETS price, they were closer to 100 euros. I talk about long-term means 1 or 2 years, because there is no prediction for the next years. So basically, it's also not predictions, but parameters which are taken into account by policymakers, how they see this macroeconomic system developing, what kind of assumptions they are using. And one of the assumptions is oil price, another assumption is interest rate. Another assumption is ETS price, and they got quite significantly lowered in the most recent report by around 20 euros by memory. So it's another part. It depends how much would it cost to import, to get this certificate, to get this clearance on CBAM when it starts.
Thank you.
A big topic for the future to discuss.
Yes.
Thank you, Alexander. Thank you, Emanuele. Thank you, Fernando. Our webinar comes to an end, and I hope we have answered all your questions and doubts. Let me announce that in the coming days, EUROMETAL will be launching a market survey for European distribution with highlights on stock holding, on trading, and also service centers. We invite all our members to participate in this survey. It will be quick and practical. I also leave a challenge for the non-members to join our association. You can consult our mission and actions on our website, eurometal.net. And I hope to have you again at another event, at another webinar.